We just didn't talk in my household. There was no hugging, no deep talks, no kissing. I was always curious, so I sort of made up stories in my own head. Not necessarily a negative experience, but trauma's trauma. I didn't think life was worth living. I didn't think that I could continue life with the pain. It was always worrying about what's going to happen. You realize that if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. You only fail when you quit and you stop. It's boundaries, it's self-love, it's self-awareness. Stand in your authentic self is a strength and a power that not many will understand. And they don't have to understand it because it's your story. You don't need acceptance. We all have the fire within. We just need that spark.
Where does your story sort of begin?
I would say there's probably two parts. There's the part before my crisis, and then there's the part after my crisis. Maybe 2018 is when everything kind of came to a halt. I smashed through rock bottom. Like there was no bottom. It was just like it kept going and going and going. And it seemed like there was no end. It was a culmination of things. So you have so many variables in life. And then, you add a crazy hectic work schedule, kids, partner, friendships, family relationships. And if none of them seem to be working out, you just begin to question things. And unfortunately, I never learned or had some of the skills needed to, I guess, have a more healthy mindset. So it basically came down to me on the bathroom floor with two choices of, do I end my life or do I get back up and do something about it? Thankfully, I guess something inside of me just said, get back up and do something about it. I didn't know what that something was at that time. And I didn't even know that there were skills out there to help. There was ways to mold your mind and steps to take to healing and growth. I remember when I found my therapist, and we really were like digging in, and she had said to me, it sounds like you have some sort of trauma, the way that you are reacting, the way you're talking. There seems to be some underlying trauma. And I'm like, no, like I wasn't hit. I wasn't in some crazy war or anything like that. There's nothing big and extravagant. But again, now that I know there's little t's, big t's, trauma is trauma, whether we perceive it that way or not. So now go back and we just didn't talk in my household. My parents didn't sleep in the same bed. Nobody asked questions. And I think for me, I was always curious. So a part of me didn't ask. So I sort of made up stories in my own head. But then there was nobody to kind of bounce these ideas off of,
Hmm.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But we didn't, and again, it wasn't necessarily a negative experience. It was just there was nothing there. It was again there was no hugging, no deep talks, no kissing, um, none of that stuff.
Yeah.
I remember certain holidays that were kind of treated as a normal day, and it was for me. It was fine. I didn't really know any different. It's that purple elephant in the room. You grow up with a purple elephant in your room, and a friend come over one day and says, "Well, what the heck is that? Like that's weird. You got a purple elephant." And you're like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "That's normal, right?" And you don't know any different.
Hmm.
And then again, you don't see it as a big deal. So when you grow up and then you realize some of these things start happening, um, and it could be a result of that. But in your head, you're like, well, it's not really a big deal. Like I said, my parents didn't beat me. I was
Yeah.
never like verbally assaulted or locked in a closet. It's just, but again, trauma is trauma. Everyone experiences things different. It's all individualistic. So
Yeah.
if you're dismissed, if you're ignored, if you're kind of pushed to the side, or um, if you're just not given the nurturing that an individual needs, that can develop into some unhealthy patterns and come out as symptoms one day.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, whoever said that trauma has to look a certain way, psychologists or therapists conducting studies, they're looking for very extreme cases like war veterans or survivors of sexual abuse. But neglect and complete and absolute dismissal as a child can play such a massive role in just the way that you see the world and the way that you see yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Perfectly said. That's exactly it. The way you see the world and the way you see yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any recollections of any kind of like collective sort of family unit moments, like a dinner that you all sat at together, or an event that you kind of all went to together as a family?
Not many, but I remember when my grandmother was still alive. It was always she kind of, I guess, held that piece together. And being that old school kind of mindset, with family, she had everybody at her house, and it was a big deal. There was always a dinner, tons of food, and the rest of the family. So it was, I guess major holidays, maybe Christmas time, stuff like that. It wasn't often, but those are the ones that I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. What stands out to you in those memories?
I guess uh, a connectedness, even though, see, it's weird because the way I see things, I see it as a connectedness, but then at the same time, it was hard for me to understand that one day it was like, cool, like this worked. But then 364 days out of the year, no one talked after that. So it was cool and it was something to hold on to, but at the same time, I think it may have added to some of the confusion as well, if that makes any sense.
Do you know what was your relationship between your mum and your dad? Were they already sort of estranged in a sense by the time you were born?
I That's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that. Unfortunately, my mom passed away, um, and we still, even though I've done some work and am growing and moving forward, it's really hard to kind of describe. But anytime like I would get around my dad or my brother or family, like we're good, but to have a talk like that is it's never happened. And even now, like I said, doing some work, I just still get this something in my throat, and it's like literally I can't talk. Like the questions don't come out. So, um, I don't know. I tried not to beat myself up too much over it, and I just allow it to be what it is. I think at this stage of my life, I'm working more on acceptance than anything else. I don't have to, if there's resistance, I don't have to fight it. I don't
Mm,
have to fix it. I just have to accept it for what it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about the concept of safety? What is safety to you?
Oof. Um, that's a big one. Safety to me is familiar. Um, And it depends also. Sometimes safety is quiet and sometimes safety is loud. But I think at the end of the day, safety is consistent, familiar, and an understanding. It's not the dismissal of, well, that shouldn't happen, or oh, you're crazy for thinking that way. It's allowing somebody to the space to think that way. And you don't have to question it, but if someone were to say, well, geez, why do you think that way, or what makes you feel that way,
Mm,
that that's safety.
right. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in agreement with you per se, but sort of just
No.
validating and accepting that you have your point of view and that's totally okay.
Yeah, not even validation, but more acknowledgement, I guess. Like I said, you don't have to agree. No one's gonna agree all the time. That's just not how things are. But I think those moments where you don't agree and you can talk through it, on the other side of that is not only more resilience, but it's a more powerful love. Like I said, once you start to understand things a little bit better, that's where the empathy and the compassion, that's where they're like built. If you're in a kitchen and you're, cooking up a big pot of compassion and empathy, like that's the start of it right there is understanding. Without the understanding, it's just, we think we know and then we judge and we don't understand what that person went through or what they are going through currently.
Did you feel as a young child I'm going to go back to safety. Did you feel safe or unsafe in your childhood?
You know, as a child, I don't think I felt unsafe. I felt unaware. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was never like an unsafe. It was just that's the way things were.
Hmm.
And again, I think even that followed me, like you said, that kind of changes your perspective and your view on yourself. And it's just that whole unawareness, and this is the way I thought everything is supposed to be, followed me throughout life. You know, like before 2018, I just thought that life kind of sucked, and these were the cards I was dealt, and I just have to deal with it and push through. You know, it's more of a survival thing than anything else. It wasn't living. It was it was going through life unconsciously, in like a zombie-like state, and just pushing through. Like, well, this is just it. You know, my life sucks. All right, well, I guess I'll just try and deal with it the best I can
Hmm.
because I was unaware.
At what point did you sort of start to have that awareness that something was not kind of right at home and the situation at home was not a comfortable space to be in?
Really, I don't think it was until like my later teens, to be honest
Mm.
with you. I had a friend who lived down the street, and his his whole situation, the environment was completely different. So it was kind of cool to go over to his house and hang out because it was a different interaction. So I could just sit back and watch and kind of understand like how they do it and see other aspects of family life.
Yeah.
But I still didn't really connect the dots, I guess I'll say, until later on. I'm not even sure. It would have to be later in my teens.
Yeah. Looking back, do you ever kind of recall really craving, you know, connection, deeper conversations with people? Like, did you sort of seek
Absolutely.
that out in school and in friends? And yeah.
Um, and in school, for me, I ended up because the where I grew up and the school I went to, it was very, very large classrooms. So you're talking 40 plus kids a classroom. Eventually, I think in maybe like part of middle school, I ended up in this program that was more, I think they was like at-risk kids. So it was kind of the smaller classrooms. It was more one-on-one with teachers because in the, I guess I'll call it the mainstream, you would you could get lost. You know what I mean? You got 40 kids and their teacher's trying to do their job, teach a lesson, and three other kids have questions. By the time you can get your question in, it's time to go.
Hmm.
So again, it was that like, all right, well, I guess this is just the way it is. I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and do the best I can and keep going. As you see, the pieces kind of fit in those specific areas.
As a child, there's probably two places where you're really going to be consistently in a closed space with a lot of people, where you can kind of compare the interactions and the dynamics between people. Like you might be at home and it's a very quiet place and no one's really interacting with each other. But then when you're in a classroom and you see how people are so attentive of each other or, making friends and communicating with each other, realizing that there is another sort of like side to it that where communication runs rampant.
Again, I didn't have the communication skills
Yeah.
to kind of either spark up a conversation. There was a side of me that was a ghost, and then there was a side of me that was kind of just friends with everybody. You know, it didn't matter the group or what someone associated with or what they thought they were, whatever. I was kind of just, I was good with everybody, you
Yeah.
know. But as a whole, like as a base, I was more of a ghost and just kind of watched and just took in the environment and tried to understand it, I think,
Yeah.
which I don't know. I don't know if that was a good thing or what, but that's how it went.
If one of your teachers had to describe you as a child, how would they describe you?
I would say probably quiet, but once I get comfortable and open up a bit more, I can be pretty funny and silly and more open, I guess, just to say. It's funny because in middle school, so I talked about that class that I was in that was more smaller groups, and one of the teachers that was a part of that, we became real close, and I'm still friends with her to this day. Like, I spoke at her retirement party. She was a pivotal role too, because, to have a teacher, to have an adult go out of their way and pay attention to you, I guess you feel a little bit important. You feel like what you have to say somebody wants to listen to. So she was a pivotal role in that whole process.
It seems like being shy and sort of timid, and sort of suddenly being in the spotlight, it could be one of two things, right? Where it's just, you can't do this, this is overwhelming for you. Or, if that person is able to give you that sense of safety and that, hey, I'm not judging you, I'm just interested in you, that's it. Then sort of being in the spotlight can be such a refreshing new experience for you, as a child who's kind of always been, sidelined in a sense.
Perfectly said. I think sideline is a great word, and I think it's still to this day. There's not a need for me to be in the spotlight. Like, I don't have to shine the light on myself and make it about me, because I think part of it is what you said, is that safety, comfortable. But I try to push myself because you don't want to stay in that comfortable place too long either. It's nice that that comfortable place is there, but you don't want to get comfortable in the comfortable, I'll say.
I hear you. That makes total sense. Especially because you're so familiar with being in the corner and being a silent observer that it almost becomes like your safety. Like, hey, I can go to a party and I can be standing in the corner. And in fact, the less people notice me, the safer I am. Like, I don't want to be in the
Absolutely.
spotlight anymore. Yeah.
The old
Yeah.
pair of jeans, the old comfy pair of jeans, that's
Yeah.
always there for you. You can always, that's how my depression is. It's familiar. So because it's familiar, it's consistent, it's safe for me.
Yeah. The predictability. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the attachment style that you think you formed over the years because of this,
Oof. Or didn't form.
or didn't form?
I would. There's definitely a base of an abandoned wound. So the abandoned wound's there, and then from that spawned, uh, I would say more of an anxious attachment. What's the newer one now that's like combined? I think it's like avoidant and anxious in one. It's a little bit of mix of them. But yeah, for sure that was, again, as I talked earlier, those things follow you through life and you don't realize it. What worked for you at age 8 and 10 and 12 don't necessarily work for you at 30, 35. So when these things follow you and then they pop up
Yeah.
when you put yourself in certain circumstances or environments, then you're like, whoa, what's going on? So it's a process of unraveling. It's a process of digging. Um, and then while you're digging, you have to kind of collect all these pieces and, act like an archaeologist, brush them off. Like, what is this? Do I need this? And then examine them and see why they're there.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Can you tell me an example or an instance where attachment style of yours sort of manifested?
Sure. Yeah. And I think this was with all interpersonal relationships. It was always, again, that abandoned wound. So that spawned, I'm not good enough.
Hmm.
That spawned, is this person going to leave me? So it was questioning. It was never staying in that present moment. It was always worrying about tomorrow, or the future, what's going to happen. So you're never in the present moment and you're missing out on what is, and you can't be yourself because you're not in the present moment. You're focusing on, tomorrow. So how can I be myself today if I'm thinking about tomorrow? So it was always, I think it brought on, it's funny because it brings on more anxiety for me because you don't know. And if you don't have the communication skills, if you don't have the self-worth, the self-love enough to ask questions, and feel confident about those questions, it's So all this stuff is at its core what it is. But then if you have an attachment wound, self-love deficit, any of those things are going to bring that level down. And there's just more hurdles in the long run, you know? Some of us have to get over more hurdles to get to that place.
Tell me about what happened that one night that sort of like changed it all for you.
So I ended up driving myself to a local hospital. And from that hospital, they were kind of like, so it kind of got worse before it got better because they were like, well, geez, you shouldn't have come here. Like, this is a hospital. Like, you need some, you know. So thankfully, there was a nurse or somebody there that questioned it more and sat with me and found out that I had a therapist. She actually ended up calling, I gave her the number for the therapist so that they had talked.
What was the
Shortly after
reason
that,
that made you drive to the hospital in the first place?
I felt unsafe. I felt that it wasn't the fact that I didn't want to live. It was the fact that I didn't think life was worth living. I didn't think that I could continue life with the pain, with the weight that I was carrying. So it was, I guess you could say, a cry for help in a way. You know, it was, I need to do something about this, and I don't know what to do. So I thought maybe a hospital, like medical professionals, could steer me in the right direction. It was not knowing, not being aware enough, not knowing that there's other avenues to take, other people to call. At that time, in my mind, everything was against me, right? Because we're looking through the lens that we create. And if I'm looking at a situation through my lens, it's not necessarily the reality of the situation. You know, I thought that if I reached out to some people, they would dismiss me. If I thought that I reached out to somebody, I thought that they just didn't care. Why would they care to help me, or why would they want to take an hour out of their day to talk me off a ledge, basically?
You mentioned that up until that point you were seeking out therapists. So, what was sort of the perspectives this therapist was offering you that was keeping you going?
So before that incident, it was a lot of black and white thinking, a lot of cognitive dissonance, irrational thoughts, that whole process. Um, but after I went to the hospital, I went back to the same therapist that I'm talking about now, and I just said, I remember saying the words, "I'll do anything. I can't live like this." And she knew me enough to where what she was going to offer me, I would probably say no. And she said, "Are you sure you'll do anything?" And I said, "Yes." There's a place called Four Winds, and it's like an inpatient, basically,
Okay.
inpatient, outpatient place, and it's groups. So, you know, you have a group of 10 people, and you have to talk and you have to participate in these things. So she brought that up, and she gave me the number, and I called, and I think that program actually is what really changed things. It really just, I would say, saved my life in a way.
Yeah.
You learn skills. You learn about dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, which is it's similar to CBT, the cognitive behavior therapy. Um, but again, you learn these skills. I didn't know there was things you could do to change your mindset. You learn about neuroplasticity, and you can change the brain. You can change the way you think and the way you see things. And you realize about your perception. You know, you realize that if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. You don't fail. You only fail when you quit and you stop. You didn't get to this point without making mistakes. Mistakes are just mistakes. They don't define who you are, but you also have the choice to allow that mistake to refine yourself. Again, you hold the pen. You hold that pen and you can create what you want to create.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, again, I didn't know these things. I think being confused about what I was thinking. Suicidal ideation it's getting better, but it's not talked about, and we put our judgments on ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, I'm bad for thinking this way. You know, I shouldn't be thinking that I want to end my life. And there's passive and there's active suicidal ideation. And the passive is just thoughts, and the thoughts come and go. And once you start learning that you have thoughts, but you're not your thoughts, you can understand it, and that thought is like a cloud, and it just kind of comes and goes, and and it helps because again, you're having this thought no matter what, but that thought is just a thought. what
Mm.
what happens with that thought is we put whatever onto that thought, whether that thought is bad or if it's good. That thought is just a thought. It's not bad or good. Learning these skills is priceless, and I think everybody should, to dig down and venture into this realm a bit and just better themselves.
Yeah. It sounds like that you guys did quite a bit of meditation over there as well, because a lot of the stuff that you're speaking of right now is very much some of the fundamentals of what meditation is. And it's all about kind of going back into the present moment of like, focusing on the sensations in your body and every thought that comes and goes, kind of allow it to come, don't judge it, let it kind of slowly pass and bring your thought back to your breath and bring your thought back into your body sensations. Slowly and slowly, you start to realize that as you have more and more focus and control over your thoughts and you are able to sort of like tap into the emotion in your body, the sensations in your body, then are you sort of able to then start to ask the questions to help to release it is kind of what we call the somatic meditations, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you walk me through sort of like typically what was a day like over here and what will you be doing from morning to night at the center?
Um, so it was kind of set up as like a class, like going to school. You would be given a schedule. It was pretty open, so like maybe the first block of say like 9 to 10:30, there would be three different classes going on. You could choose. If you wanted to do an art class, you could do an art class. If you wanted to do talk therapy, you could do talk therapy. If you wanted to work on DBT skills, you can work on DBT skills. After that block, you'd have another section of different classes and two or three to choose from. Sometimes there was mandatory things where you had to go, like these check-ins. Sometimes you would be given a therapist there. That would be your therapist for the 5 weeks or whatever that you're there, and you'd check in and meet with them. But then again, you'd have lunch, come back, and again you'd have more blocks with different classes,
Mm,
whether they were learning about emotional regulation, distress tolerance, interpersonal effectiveness, mindfulness, all these different skills.
yeah.
And it was great. I never knew anything like that existed. I didn't know that there was these kind of tools out there to help.
Mm,
So it was great. Like I said, first couple days were tough because I was at such a low point, um, that it was hard to retain any kind of information, and participate just because, um, you know, you're in this strange environment, strange people. So the anxiety's high and you're not sure what to do and how to act.
Were all of the other patients going through something similar? Would you categorize like they'd all had some kind of suicidal thought or depression, or were they all vastly different from each other?
I feel like maybe the diagnoses were different, but that common thread of the suicidal ideation or suicide attempt, anything like that,
Mm,
clinical depression was definitely on the list for
yeah.
sure.
I'm curious as to like how that was for you, because this is probably the first time you might be sitting in a room in a group of people who are talking all about emotions, which is something you just never had growing
Yes.
up. How was that for you?
It was new. Like you said, it was new. It was interesting. I think once I was in there for like a couple weeks, I started to kind of understand that in order for it to work, you have to play a role.
Mm,
You have to do the work and you have to be involved. It's one thing to sit on the sideline and watch, but it's another thing to get in the game and start running the plays and throwing the passes and all that stuff. So, to be honest with you, that 5 weeks was so huge because it spawned a bunch of different things. In the beginning, I was kind of more reserved and laid back and shy. But towards the end, I started to not only advocate for myself, but advocate for others that were in the group. There was a one guy, I think he had bipolar, and he rarely spoke. And one day at lunch, I would sit with him at lunch and we would talk. And he said that he had an issue that he really wanted to bring up, but he was unsure about speaking. So literally, like right after lunch, we had a group, and he was in it, and I was speaking, and I said, "Well, I said I know that so and so has something that he wanted to say too." So, and I looked at him. I said, "Is that okay?" And he was like, "Yeah." So I kind of
Nudged him in
cleared the
the head.
path a little bit and
Yeah.
allowed him that space to speak. After I got out, I formed a peer group. It was like a mental health meetup. So I did that for a while and facilitated groups here and there. Shortly after that, I started up an older podcast um, that was uh, more about suicide awareness and stuff like that. Shortly after that, I wrote a book. That podcast ended. That's when I started up the podcast that I co-host now with Karen called Pieces to Wellness.
Yeah.
And Pieces to Wellness, we talk about all the different pieces to wellness and
Yeah.
try to help people stay on more of the wellness side of the
Mm.
spectrum. I look at mental health as a spectrum. One side's illness, one side's wellness. And
Mm.
there's different pieces, right, that we can do. Like you had brought up meditation, that would be a piece
Mm.
to stay on the wellness side.
I love how this experience really helped you to step into your powerful self. For someone who struggled to speak their own thoughts, to be creative in that process and help others, it's actually like a really huge feat.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. It's nice to be acknowledged that in that way because that's kind of how the creative side is how I see it because I'm not the greatest at communicating what I want to communicate, I
Mm.
guess.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's better through a creative outlet.
Yeah.
You know, I make designs for the podcast now, so I can kind of take my words and put them on this little template and, you know, put a little design over it and stuff like that. And that's
Yeah.
the creative side, which again, being creative is another piece to wellness. You know, for
Mm.
me, being creative is allowing myself to be vulnerable in a different state.
Mm.
And it's, for me, I enjoy it.
Your dad or your brother or your other family members, have they read your book? Have they heard your podcast? Have they ever spoken to you about all of that?
Not, that's funny. That question comes up a lot. My dad knows we have, it's a really different kind of relationship. You know, nothing bad to say about him. It's just he's a simple man, and we just don't have those kind of conversations.
Mm.
He knows that I wrote a book. I don't think he understands what a podcast is or anything like that.
Yeah.
My brother knows I wrote a book. I'm pretty sure he did not read it. He also knows that I do a podcast, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't listen, which I'm
Yeah.
fine with. It's not a bad thing. It's just that's a different angle, so it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
And I even say I think in the book, I put it out to my brother and my father, and just we have a weird relationship, but it's our weird relationship. It's just how we do it, and I did my part in kind of breaking some walls down, but
Yeah.
there's still more room to go, but there's also, as I spoke of earlier, it's that acceptance piece.
I find it fascinating how you've like come out of your shell in the sense that you've learned how to express your emotions really eloquently and to share it on different platforms, on a podcast and speaking to strangers. But that barrier still holds. And in a sense, they know what you've gone through. They know how it's impacted you. Everyone knows everything in a sense.
It is funny, like you said, that barrier's still there, and
Yeah.
it's I don't know, maybe it's more common that people can to be a little bit more open and free with strangers. I mean, you do a podcast, so you understand that,
Yeah.
you know, talking on this and doing this side of it is different from sitting down. You know, a lot of moments on here where you talk about all sorts of different things, right? And sometimes you add in your own little perspective on it and your own experience. So, yeah, it can be, it's easier to do on the podcast for
Yeah.
me.
100%. What's your relationship now like with partners, with friends?
I have a small circle, and we talked about perception and people judging and stuff like that. People may look at me and think I'm a little bit more on the quiet side or whatever, but they don't know the war that I had to make it through to get to the peace that I walk in now.
Mm,
So again, it's that small circle that helps protect my peace.
yeah.
It's boundaries, it's self-love, it's self-awareness. I know who I am, so I don't need validation from any other person. I know that when I speak and I do things, I do them from a good place. They may not come out that way, and everybody's not going to see it the way I see it, and I get that. I'm not for everybody, but I'm good with that. And it's not like here I am avoiding people, but this is my circle. Like it's open, but at the same time, I have boundaries in place. So if you come in that circle and your words don't match your actions, or you come in and you dismiss me and you don't understand and you don't follow up with questions, or you talk about me with other people, like you're no longer in that circle. I've had to do things to get to this point, and I'm not going to just allow something to come in and create some havoc in my peace.
Timothy, final message.
So this is the book. Never underestimate the power of you. Life's a DIY project. This is a DIY book. I'm not a professional. I didn't go through any kind of training. This is all things that I've researched, that I've learned. I dug into Buddhism and learned how that goes. I learned about Stoicism and took things from that I needed that helped me. I've listened to hundreds and hundreds of audiobooks, listened to thousands of podcasts. To be my own advocate and know that we all have the fire within. We just need that spark sometimes. Define happiness first. Define happiness, what happiness means to you. Define it and then follow it with diligence. That would probably be my message. I think that in a world where everybody's different and we are fighting that everyone should be the same and have the same thoughts, is a very tough road, and to stand in your authentic self is a strength and a power that not many will understand. And they don't have to understand it because it's your story, it's your life. You don't live it for others' approval or validation. You don't need acceptance. You don't need to ask questions on how to do things. You can do them and live in your authentic self.
I love that.
And you can find the podcast. The podcast is Pieces to Wellness. We're pretty active on Instagram at Pieces to Wellness. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google.
Thanks so much, Timothy, for being on Multispective and sharing such great perspective here with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a blast. I appreciate it. Very grateful for you.
If you enjoyed the episode and would like to help support the show, please follow and subscribe. You can rate and review your feedback on any of our platforms listed in the description. I'd like to recognize our guests who are vulnerable and open to share their life experiences with us. Thank you for showing us we're human. Also, a thank you to our team who worked so hard behind the scenes to make it happen.
Lucas, Stefan Menzel.
The show would be nothing without you. I'm Jenica, host and writer of the show, and you're listening to Multispective.